Hello, old sport, and welcome to the Literary Lair, and to the second week of Classic Novel Month. This week, we're going to take a look at an older book than Catcher in the Rye, The Great Gatsby. And they actually just made a movie out of it a couple of months ago, and yes, I have seen it. It's good, but I wasn't a fan of the musical direction or what they cut out. So, let's take a ride to West Egg and see if Gatsby is really all that great. The cover is weird. I admit, it's symbolic, but it's weird. The eyes are either T.J. Eckleburg or Daisy Buchanan. Either way, it's pretty symbolic to the story. T.J. Eckleburg being an observer of some sorts, and Daisy being... well, we'll find out about Daisy when we get to the story. But it's a pretty famous cover, and the image of the city is magnificent. But enough about the cover. Let's get to the story. The story takes place in the summer of 1922, narrated by Nick Carraway, played by Peter Parker. No, not emo Peter Parker, although he acts like that sometimes, who is from the Midwest, and takes a job in New York as a bond salesman. He rents a small house on Long Island and in the village of West Egg next door to the huge mansion of J. Gatsby.
Gatsby? What Gatsby?
A mysterious millionaire who holds extravagant parties. Nick drives across the bay to East Egg for dinner at the home of his cousin, Daisy Buchanan, and her husband, Tom, a college acquaintance of Nick's. They introduce Nick to Jordan Baker, an attractive, cynical young golfer with whom Nick begins a romantic relationship, although it doesn't really go anywhere. She reveals to Nick that Tom has a mistress, Myrtle Wilson, who is the great-grandmother of Matilda, and lives in the Valley of Ashes, an industrial dumping ground between West Egg and New York City. Not long after learning this, Nick travels to New York City with Tom and Myrtle to an apartment they keep for their affair. At the apartment, a vulgar and bizarre party ends with Tom breaking Myrtle's nose after he tells Tom about Daisy. As the summer progresses, Nick eventually receives an invitation to one of Gatsby's parties. Nick encounters Jordan at the party, and they meet Gatsby himself, an aloof and surprisingly young man who recognizes Nick from the same division in the war. Through Jordan, Nick learns that Gatsby knew Daisy from a romantic encounter in 1917 and is deeply in love with her. He spends many nights staring at the green light at the end of her dock, across the bay from his mansion, hoping one day to rekindle their romance. Sort of like when that person you like is on Facebook and you stare at the green chat light. Thank you, Tumblr, for that surprisingly accurate literary analogy. Gatsby's extravagant lifestyle and wild parties are in an attempt to impress Daisy, in the hopes that she will one day appear again at Gatsby's doorsteps. Gatsby now wants Nick to arrange a reunion between himself and Daisy. Nick invites Daisy to have tea at his house without telling her that Gatsby will also be there. After an initially awkward reunion where Gatsby runs out into the rain because he's nervous, Gatsby and Daisy re-establish their connection. They begin an affair, and after a short time, Tom grows and is increasingly suspicious of his wife's relationship with Gatsby, because he might be slow, but he's not an idiot. At a luncheon at the Buchanan's house, Gatsby stares at Daisy with such an undisguised passion that Tom realizes Gatsby is in love with her. Gatsby looks sort of like this.
I want a diamond ring, I want some bracelets and everything. Daddy, you better get the best for me. Hey, Daddy, won't I look swell in sable?
Though Tom is himself involved in an extramarital affair, he is outraged by his wife's infidelity, because Tom is a hypocritical douchebag. He forces the group to drive into New York City, where he confronts Gatsby in a suite at the Plaza Hotel, which in the movie looked like the beginning of a romance between Tom and Gatsby. Tom asserts that he and Daisy have a history that Gatsby could never understand, and he announces to his wife that Gatsby is a criminal whose fortune comes from bootlegging alcohol and other illegal activities. However, it's completely fine to drink said alcohol, but God forbid you sell it. Daisy realizes that her allegiance is to Tom, and Tom contemptuously sends her back to East Egg with Gatsby, attempting to prove that Gatsby cannot hurt him. When Nick, Jordan, and Tom drive through the Valley of Ashes, however, they discover that Gatsby's car has struck and killed Myrtle, Tom's lover. Nick later learns from Gatsby that Daisy was driving the car at the time of the accident, but that Gatsby intended to take the blame. The next day, Tom tells Myrtle's husband George that Gatsby was the driver of the car, but only because Wilson was threatening him with a gun. George, who has leapt to the conclusion that the driver of the car that killed her must have been her lover, which is some pretty thin logic,
There is logic in what he says.
tracks Gatsby to his mansion and fatally shoots both Gatsby and himself. Gatsby dies in his pool, which is the second time Leonardo DiCaprio has died in the water. Too soon? Nick stages an upsettingly small funeral for Gatsby, which leads to Gatsby's dad showing up, which they completely cut out of the movie. I apologize for bringing up the movie so much, but they really cut a lot of the book out of it. Nick also ends his relationship with Jordan, which wasn't going anywhere anyway, and moves back to the Midwest to escape the disgust he feels for the people surrounding Gatsby's life, and for the moral emptiness of the wealthy American lifestyle, and the pursuit of the American dream. So, was The Great Gatsby really that great? Well, not really. I mean, the book is fantastic, but it's not without its flaws. Nick is a pretty unlikable character and is only there to be the narrator. In fact, the website College Humor did a funny article on what if The Great Gatsby was narrated by other people. And it does put the book in a new light, and I highly recommend reading that article after the book. And as for Gatsby, you sympathize with him because he lost the one thing he wanted, and that's what killed him. And this is a bit off topic, but there is a bit of a gay undertone with Nick's character, especially in the chapter with the party at Tom and Myrtle's apartment. I'm not going to go into great detail on it, but if you have ever read the book, you would notice it. So, next week we go even farther back in time to read the adventures of a kid who tricks other kids into painting a fence for him. Oh, and in regards to that poll I did, not a lot of people have voted, but what people have voted for were Black Scarab riffs and a Q&A video. And while I am working on the riffs, because they do take a while for me to find something and to make jokes about, I'm gonna prepare a Q&A video. I already have a few questions for it, but if you have any questions, you could leave them in the comments section or on my Twitter or Tumblr. So, if you could submit, and see you later.